So welcome everyone to session 4 of Living Your Best Life. For those of you who it is your first session, just to kind of go over how the sessions kind of run is at the beginning part of it, I do a brief presentation, which will be looking at the key topics. Today it will be around self-leadership. And then afterwards, we have group discussions on the topics that have been raised, and it gives a chance and opportunity to people to kind of explore a bit further and hear from other people's experience, which helps to enrichen the kind of knowledge and understanding that you get from the topics that are being explored today. So in terms of me and who we are, so Edifying Answers, our goal, my aim is to unlock insight. And with every workshop or webinar that I do, I aim to do that so that you get more of an understanding of you. And the better that you understand yourself is the better that you can empower yourself to live your best life. So we'll start off with a quick recap from last week, which was on time to let go and be free. And so one of the topics that we looked at was the fact that we are not Atlas. And Atlas, for those who are not sure, is the Titan god of endurance and strength and astronomy. And I think often we can take on all of the world's problems, our brothers, our friends, our uncles, our colleagues, our children, the dog, the cat, and everything else. And it becomes unmanageable. And as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, our battery runs down low. And so Atlas also stands for what we can do to change our scenario. So the A is about accepting our limitations, accepting what we can do, what we can't do, what we're capable of and what we're not capable of. And then it's about talking up. The T is for talking up and actually saying to people, sorry, I can't handle that. Sorry, that's too much for me. Sorry, that's your issue you're going to have to address and deal with. And then the L is about learning from previous experiences, learning from the past. Your past is your greatest teacher. And then the A is for action. So as you start to recognize and doing differently, take action, do things differently so that your life will be different. You know, nothing changes unless nothing changes. And as a result of doing those, you have the S, which means that you will succeed. You know, you won't be carrying this heavy burden that keeps you weighed down, so you can start to live your best life. We also looked at about the importance of letting go. And as the picture shows, sometimes holding on does more damage than letting go. And sometimes, you know, we try to hold on to certain types of thoughts, negative thoughts, you know, feelings, guilt and shame. We hold on to the past mistakes that we've made that we don't let go of. We keep beating ourselves over the head about what we did previously, even though we can never change it. You know, sometimes we're holding on to jobs that we've outgrown. And, you know, we're sick and tired of being in a certain position, but we don't move on because we're worried about change. We're worried if it will be worse, but you're not happy. You're just surviving where you're at, but we don't want to move on. And sometimes we need to just let go. And even in relationships, some relationships change, some, you know, people change. And sometimes we're holding on to what used to be and not accepting what is. And so we looked about the importance of letting go, even though it hurts to let go. Sometimes it's much more painful to hold on. And the final thing we looked at was about freeing ourselves from all of the voices, you know, all of the things that people have said over our lives, whether it was a teacher, whether it was an ex-partner, whether it was a parent, all of the things, you will be a failure, you won't be able to do it, no one will love you, all of those things that we hold on to. And it's time to let go of the voices and release ourselves from those things that have been spoken over us that keep us bound. And in the session, I was talking about and explaining how the brain regulates and manages emotional and physical pain in exactly the same way. So words that are spoken can be just as hurtful and painful as a punch that is thrown, or if you break an ankle, it can be just as painful as a broken heart. And so, you know, there is sometimes where we have to go back and mend and release some of those thoughts and feelings and words that have been spoken over our lives, because they're still keeping people captive today. So that was a brief synopsis of what we kind of looked at last week. If you do want to see the whole webinar, then you can go onto my YouTube channel and you'll be able to catch up and watch it. So for today, we are looking at leadership and self-leadership. And, you know, it's really important that we are able to demonstrate leadership and live leadership in our day-to-day activities. And, you know, when we think about leadership, for me, this picture sums it up completely. On the left-hand side, you can see that, you know, people are falling down off the cliff, you know, but the boss is at the top saying, I've done it. I achieved, I've done well. And that can sometimes be how a boss or a manager is. They can be self-centered, they can be thinking about themselves. And I remember when I heard this quote, and it says, when I becomes we, even illness becomes wellness. And a leader has a we mindset. It's about working with other people. It's about, as you can see on the right-hand side, lifting other people up. Great leaders create other leaders. And, you know, so if we want to be a leader, we want to be that person that can uplift others, that has purpose, that has values, that has principles, you know, passion, you know, things that they are governed by, and that they don't do things that don't line up with that. They're honest, they can communicate, they're responsible, they're committed. They're all of these kind of things that makes people want to gravitate to them, makes people want to be in their presence. Another thing about leaders is that they don't force people to follow. They invite them on a journey. And what I like about this picture is the fact that it's ducks following a human, which highlights a very important point. You don't have to be of the same kin. You don't have to be of the same sexual orientation. You don't have to be of the same belief system. But if what you're saying and the aura and the energy behind you connects with that individual, they will want to follow you regardless. And one of the things that often happens with managers, because you can be a manager and not be a leader, and you can be a leader and not be a manager. But what happens often with managers who are not leaders is they try to force respect of others, and they try to demand what people should do. Whereas leaders will just ask someone to do it and people will volunteer. And so having those leadership skills are vital for all areas of our life, not just in terms of work and employment, but for all areas of our lives. So, self-leadership. So great leadership always starts with active self-leadership. You see, a mistake that people often make is that people just want to do something when the situation comes up. So it's like someone who's never gone to self-defense lessons, and then a situation happens where they need to defend themselves, and they think, oh, let me try and do it now. That doesn't work. Or an athlete who hasn't trained, and then on the day when it's time to run the race, they wonder why they have a false start. Well, leadership is the same way. It's not something that you do when a problem comes up. It's something that you live by daily, and it starts within you. So there is a leadership problem and an equation that often comes up. And with most problems that you'll find in terms of leadership, it'd be one of these three or a combination of all of these three. So TLT stands for too little time. Times people, times power. And so you'll find that with one of these three or with all of these three will play out in whatever problems that come up around leadership. So with too little time, so one of the most common forms of stress that we experience is the feeling of being overwhelmed with far too much to do and having too little time to do it. And so, in fact, time poverty is one of the biggest single problems facing most people today. They don't know how to manage their time. They've got too much problems coming up. There's too many issues. They don't know which one to do first. And then someone else is coming involved and asking them for more help when they don't have enough time as it is. So how they respond to that person may create another problem, which makes that person think because of the power dynamics that they feel they can talk to them. Like it just goes on and on and on. And so having too little time is something that can affect all of us, even if you're not a manager. Just in our day-to-day life, managing the children, managing our own well-being, managing work commitments, managing a relationship with someone else. And how do we manage that all? This is why time management is key. So the two indispensable keys to time management are: one, the ability to set priorities. We have to be able to set priorities. And that can be done various different ways. There's various different tools for that. You can Google it and look. A simple one that I often use is urgent, important, not important. You could have 25 tasks to do. If you put them in those three categories, urgent, important, and not important, you will find that there may be 5 that are urgent. Those are the 5 that you need to do. And so then you're not worrying about 25 things. You are focused on 5 things that you need to do. And the second thing is the ability to concentrate single-mindedly on one thing at a time. And so you have to always ask yourself, what is the most valuable use of my time right now? And focus on that. Many people think that you can multitask and do these things. The reality and the fact is the brain, even though it's a great thing and a powerful thing, only has the ability to focus on one thing at one time. And so that's why the first part is about prioritizing, so you know what those few things that you need to focus on, and you take one of them on at a time. And when you do that, you are able to put all of your effort, all of your attention into that one thing, which means you get it done quicker, more productively, and it's done to the right standard, and then you move on to the other one. So too little time is one of a massive factor that affects people with self-leadership. The second one is people. So Dee Hock, the founder of Visa, said that if you want to lead, invest at least 40% of your time in leading yourself. You see, one of the things that people make a mistake in thinking is that focusing on other people, you can get something done in terms of leadership. But if you're not leading yourself, if you're not doing the right thing within yourself, you can't do it when it comes to other people. And the greatest way that you can show leadership to people is when they see that you have self-leadership. If you're unorganized and you're always, turning up late for things and you seem like you haven't got it together, why would someone want to value what you're saying? But if you seem like you're composed and you're organized and you know what you're doing, people are more likely to want to hear what you're saying. So it's about investing 40% in yourself, because the more that you're doing that, is the better equipped you are and the more ready you will be when there's a chance or an occasion where you need to show leadership for other people. Bruce Lee said, I would rather fear a man that has practiced one kick 1,000 times than 1,000 kicks once. And so the more that you invest and spend time in yourself is the better version of you that you will become. And the third thing is power. So the ability to do or act, the capacity of doing or accomplishing something. And it can also mean strength, might, or force. And so, this particular area can be very tricky in terms of in relationships and how that dynamic plays out. But one thing that I hold dear to me and that I know is that he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. And I think one of the things that we have to learn to do is to rule our own spirit, is to conquer our own spirit, our own fears, our own worries, our own anxieties. Because when you do that, you live self leadership. And as the African proverb says, when the enemy within is conquered, the enemy without can do us no harm. And so when you have conquered those things within yourself, you don't fear to have a courageous conversation with someone else because you've already done that with yourself. You're not afraid to be, or you're not uncomfortable, you become comfortable with being uncomfortable in situations with others because you've done it with yourself. And so it's really important that we understand that if you want to have leadership, it starts with you. It starts in your bedroom. It starts in your heart and in your mind. It starts when no one else is around. So lead others correctly by first leading yourself. And there's 3 stages to this. Okay. If you invest time in these 3 simple principles, you will see how you will grow and develop and expand abundantly in terms of your self leadership. And the first one is self awareness. So, what I would ask you to do in this time, if you do have a pen and paper, you can make notes, but reflect over bad leaders that you have experienced. So, whether it was a manager, whether it was someone just, who was kind of abrupt, short, arrogant, didn't listen to you, whatever it may be, what was that bad leaders that you experienced? And then I want you to write down a list of their character traits. Those things that annoyed you or agitated you or made you reluctant to go to them, even if you did need their help and support. And then you give yourself an honest score from 1 to 5 at how good you operate in each of those traits. Because it's easy to point the finger at other people, but the same judgment we use to other people, we should use for ourselves. So how do you line up when you look at yourself and put yourself under the microscope concerning those very same traits that you didn't like when someone else did it? And where you score low, don't have guilt or shame. Just recognize it and look at what plan you aim to do to improve it. And the more that you do that, the more self-awareness that you become, is the less likely that you will repeat counterproductive attitude, mindsets, and characteristics. Step 2 is self-reflection. So practice this daily for 5 minutes, whether it be in the morning or in the evening, or if you're really focused and you want to do it in the morning and evening. Take time out to reflect over your day. If it's the morning, what's your goal? What's your plan for that day? What's the characteristics of leadership that you want to focus on and envision that you're going to live through in that day? If it's the end of the day, how did you stack up? Did it work out well? What did you recognize and realize was a trait that you kind of went into default position about, but you don't want to repeat that? What was a trait that you did really well that you want to remind yourself to walk in that the next time an opportunity comes up? Self-reflection is key. Then you think about what you have achieved and where you could improve without judgment. And then, ask yourself, how did my leadership show? So with what you did, how did other people respond? That's how you know how it showed. Did people thank you for something? Was someone, inspired when they finished talking to you? Did someone say thanks at the end of that? That makes you know that they appreciated it. What challenges did you face, even today? I faced many challenges today, and I had to make some very difficult decisions. But there's something that I always say to myself is that do what is right over what is easy. And I'm glad to say I did that today, even though it was difficult. And what kind of leader would I like to be to overcome these challenges? Sometimes there might be a challenge that you're facing, and it's like, what leadership skills or abilities am I going to adapt today? I may not be comfortable doing it, but I'm going to walk in that until I become comfortable in that characteristic. And then the third one is self-regulation. So there is a tool called the reframing tool that can be used when you feel annoyed or frustrated by someone or something. And what you basically do is you ask yourself, how important is this issue on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being low, 10 being high. And it could be something, sometimes we get so upset over really trivial stuff. Someone stepped on your foot on the train, or, someone left, I don't know, the rubbish bin open, or something was spilt and not cleaned up properly in the house, or, the toothpaste was on the side, a bit would gone over when by your partner or one of your children. And it's like, on the scheme of things, how important is that really? Is that something that you should be blowing your top over, or is it something that you should just go, this kind of thing happens? And the reason why that is important, because taking a step back, reacting rather than responding, and regulating your emotions will allow you to operate and respond in the appropriate manner so that you demonstrate leadership. Because as the saying says, actions speak louder than words. And if we want to show leadership, it always starts with self-leadership. And that's why I said on the previous slide, he who rules his own spirit is greater than he that takes a city. And if we can rule and control ourselves, when we feel frustrated, when we feel angered, when we feel annoyed, that we don't respond as out of that feeling, but we are able to control ourselves and still get our point across. And that is the difference between assertive and aggressive. That is the difference between, building a relationship and destroying it. That is the difference between living your best life and living in regret. So, what we are going to do now is we're going to break off into groups. I'm going to split you up into groups in a sec. But what we're going to focus on, so if you've got a pen, just write it down quickly. So those who are going to be in group 1, you're going to be looking at leadership through action. What does that mean to you? When have you experienced it? When have you done it? Group 2, you're going to be looking at leadership problems. So too little time, times people, times power. How has that played out in your life? How has that impacted on you? And how have you dealt with that? And in group 3, you're going to be looking at self-awareness, self-reflection, and self-regulation. What do those things mean to you? What has come up from what has been discussed today? What kind of goals are you going to take for yourself to move forward? So I'll stop this.